As usual, please visit the Association of MBAs community to access our slides and audio from this webinar. I'm now going to hand over to Dugway, and I hope you enjoy listening.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Femi, and good afternoon to you if you're in the UK. Not sure where some of you are around the world, I'm sure, but I'm very pleased to have been invited today to speak to you regarding networking. As Femi has said, I'm a recruitment industry expert, and some people very kindly call me an exceptional networker. So hopefully I can pass on some of my tips and pieces of advice to you in your quest for your perfect job and to build your own talent network. Now, I suppose one of the reasons people regard me as an exceptional networker is because of the work I do. It's my business to engage with clients, to engage with candidates, and really to keep my finger on the pulse of what's occurring in the talent market globally. As a result of that, I find myself making a concerted effort to attend events, to attend conferences, to work digitally with organizations and with individuals to really raise my profile and try and build my own contacts that can work to mutual benefit. So hopefully today, by the time we finish the webinar, in the next 45 minutes or so, we will have covered quite an interesting agenda for you. What I want to do is to help all of you develop an effective networking strategy that will really help enhance your post-MBA career prospects. And as I said, during the webinar, hopefully you'll learn some of the basic skills that are essential for networking if you want to maintain professional contacts who will provide you with insightful knowledge and signpost opportunities for the future. It's been said by many people, many networking gurus, that over the course of your lifetime, networking will be the single most important strategy for enhancing your career. And I have to say, I agree with that. I have a slight concern that we are moving to a self-service society, and our online culture means that people's first reaction when they're looking perhaps for a new opportunity is to go online and to apply for jobs online. But in fact, during all the conversations I've had with MBAs over the last 2 or 3 years, it's become apparent that that can be quite a frustrating process. And I'm sure many of you on this webinar have experienced scenarios where you've submitted your CV and an application form into an online portal and never heard anything else. So I want to try and help overcome that and ensure that you get to speak to the right individuals who are actually making those hiring decisions before your CV hits the portal itself. Now, to start with, what I thought would be useful is to share a very interesting stat with you. You may have seen this stat before, you may not, but it is actually fundamentally important to the whole art of networking. And quite simply, it's this. The vast majority of jobs, particularly middle management and senior jobs, are never advertised, certainly in the UK. Now, okay, I accept that if you work in the public sector, potentially there are rules and regulations around recruitment that mean this is not necessarily true. But for those of you working in the corporate world, this is definitely true. And I suppose you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why are so many jobs never advertised? Now, we don't actually know if it's 80% or 75% or what the number is, but we know it's a very, very high number. And I think the answer is quite simple. If you imagine that all of us on this call today are all working for the same company and we had a vacancy, what would we do? Well, of course, the first thing we do is we look at each other and think, is there anybody in this room who can fulfill that role satisfactorily? If there is, great, we'll go through a hiring process. If there isn't, and nobody throws the hat into the ring, what do we do next? Well, of course, what we do is we say, who do we know? Who do you know? And this becomes the whole matter of the internal referral process, which is gaining ever more currency with companies these days. But of course, there are scenarios where we don't know anybody. The referral process doesn't work. And it's only at that point that organizations go externally to external recruiters, to people like myself, headhunters, if you will, who can go and do retained search and look for what we call passive candidates. The other thing, of course, to bear in mind, and my experience bears this out, is that a lot of recruitment is confidential and discreet. And companies don't always want you, as their employees, to know what they're doing, and that it may be a very, very senior role that's got a lot of confidentiality and discretion surrounding it, and it has to be dealt with in a very particular manner. But let's assume for a moment that you're looking for a role, you're looking at your post-MBA options, and you think to yourself, how do I avoid just sending my CV into a black hole? And the answer is quite simple. You need to be connected to the decision makers and hiring managers in those businesses. As you've probably heard this saying before, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I like to think it's more accurately should be portrayed thus. It should be, it's not what you know, it's who knows you. So really, it's incumbent upon you, particularly when you're doing your MBA and you have the opportunity to build networks, to try and engage with individuals who in the future can help you with your career opportunities. I am a big believer in proactively approaching people, and I'll show you later exactly how you can do that. It's a very valuable piece of advice, and if you went to a professional careers consultant, it would cost you a lot of money. Okay, so I think there are times, of course, when you do have to submit your job applications and your CVs online through career portals. I totally accept that. That's all part of the efficiency of the modern hiring process. But I think it's really, really important that before your application is received, that somebody at the other end knows who you are. Now, I'm not sure if many of you have ever seen the movie Hoover with Leonardo DiCaprio, but there's a fantastic scene in that where a gentleman wants to work for the FBI. He engineers a meeting with J. Edgar Hoover in a restaurant, and Hoover says, "Send me your CV." And the next scene you see, of course, is J. Edgar Hoover, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, at his desk with a huge pile of CVs. Got about 500 CVs in front of him. And what he does, of course, is he goes through that pile looking for the CV of the person he met in the restaurant. So even though he's had to go through a process to be appointed, he knows the person on the other end is looking out for him, and that's really, really important. And I think if you think about it and you take the technology away for a moment, it's still people who hire people. So in order to enhance your opportunities, you really need to engage directly with those individuals, those people who can really influence and help shape your career. It's really quite simple. It's a matter of building a circle of relevant contacts and engaging with them directly. Now, when I do sessions in the UK at business schools, it's quite interesting. Sometimes I meet MBAs, and there's a thought process sometimes with lots of people who are highly qualified that having a raft of qualifications is enough. And being highly qualified will ensure that you reach your financial goals in life. But let me share some information with you that might be of interest and might change your mind on this. There's quite a lot of research that's been done into this field, and sharing some very pertinent information with you may be useful. In fact, the Carnegie Institute in the US did some very, very useful research that said that actually 85% of your financial success in life is due to things like your personality, skills in what they call human engineering, communication, negotiating, and leadership. And these are all skills that have a networking element to them. So the interesting piece here, of course, is that only 15% of your knowledge is due to your IQ. Only 15% of your financial success is due to your IQ and technical knowledge. Now, just to summarize on this slide, you'll see a sentence at the very bottom there. There was, again, research done by a Nobel-winning psychologist who found, surprise, surprise, that people would rather do business with people they like and trust, even if they have a lower quality product that's more expensive. So it's really incumbent upon you to build a network of people who like and trust you and appreciate the value that you offer to them in terms of the potential and your skills to their business. So before I talk about some specific networking strategies, I've got a few recommendations, a few initial thoughts, if you will, that may help you along the way. The first one is embarking on an MBA is really only the beginning. It's a fantastic thing to do. I remember doing my MBA many, many years ago and being immersed in knowledge and working with my cohort and sharing information with my professional network. It was a very, very, very good time. But perhaps the most important thing I did during my MBA, and many of you do this already, I don't know, is I got myself a mentor. And I went to my CEO of my company at that time, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind doing that for me. And of course, he looked at me and said, well, what does it mean? Have I got to spend hours talking to you? Does this mean? I said, no, 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 let's just get together once a month. I want to share some of my learning from my MBA with you, and in return, I want you to start to share some more information around the organization, and let's see where we can match those two up and where we can add value to each other. And you know what? At the end of 2 years, having done a part-time exec MBA, I was promoted to the highest position in that company. And it wasn't so much that I had an MBA at the end of 2 years, it was that I used the learning and the knowledge during that journey to develop relationships better with the organization I worked for, and of course, to come to the attention of the most senior person in that business. So if you don't have a mentor, go and get one. Lots of business schools organize them for you. If they don't, speak to your cohort, and perhaps look at the type of organizations you may want to work for in the future. I mean, for example, it's a very basic example, but if you wanted to work in the recruitment industry, you could approach me and you could say, I'm really interested in your business and what you do. Can you mentor me? And of course I do it. And the message I want to leave all of you with today is you'd be surprised how many people are happy to help. Don't be frightened about approaching people. There are lots and lots of people out there with lots of industry knowledge who are only too pleased to hear from other individuals who are interested in them and in their business. You really would be surprised how few people in senior positions get approached like this. And when they do, they're absolutely thrilled. So don't be shy, is what I'm saying. Okay. Business schools. Now, business school networks are very, very powerful and very useful to you as well. Certainly Amber itself is a great networking opportunity, lots and lots of events they're running like these, but physical events as well. And certainly in the UK, some of the schools geographically coherent have local organisational groups which get together in the MBA swap ideas. Now, I know there's certainly one in the Midlands here with Leicester and Nottingham and Warwick, and there are probably others as well. But you really need to tap into that and to start to really go to those events. I know sometimes these events are in the middle of winter and it's dark and it's raining and you think, well, I really want to go all the way to the middle of London to go and listen to someone. But I have to tell you, you really must make the most of these opportunities, and you must go with an open mind and think about the people that you might meet when you go there, because you never know who you're going to meet, what they're looking to do, and whether it matches up with your aspirations. I think importantly, when you're thinking about networking, both from a physical dimension and a digital dimension, the other thing you really need to do is to develop a very good personal brand. Now, I'm going to touch on that a bit later. In fact, I run a completely different session on personal branding, and now I don't have time to go into it, but it's important to learn some basics about how to approach people in a professional and polite way. And I have a good slide that I'm going to share with you in about 5 or 10 minutes. The other thing that's essential when you start thinking about networking and how to engage with your audience is to really develop your USPs, what we call your unique selling points, and to learn how to sell yourself effectively. I'm not asking you to be a double glazing salesman. I'm asking you to think about what you've done. Almost this is like your elevator pitch. You've probably heard of this phrase, an elevator pitch. It's a 2 or 3 minute introduction you would give to somebody about yourself if, for example, you found yourself in a lift or an elevator, the doors had shut, and you had the time it took from the doors to shut to get to the lobby to really engage that individual. So it's who I am, what I do, having known something about the individual you've met, and explain that you'd like to meet them again, even for a coffee, and can you get their business card? You know, you're not trying to close a deal in a lift in 2 or 3 minutes or get a job. You're just trying to engage with somebody and to try and get some more information. Now, the other thing I'm really, really keen on is to look at the whole issue of networking very proactively. If you just sit back and wait, things won't happen. You really have to look at what you're trying to achieve. Who do I want to mix with? Where am I going to find these people? Which conferences will they be at? Which events will they be at? Who may know who in my network? And start to plan out how you're going to approach them. Because the truth is that if you're in the business of perhaps looking for a new opportunity or getting promoted internally, you are in the business of sales, whether you like it or not. And you have to an extent, treat yourself like a salesperson. And what does that mean? It means you have to work out a prospect list. It means you have to know your features and benefits. What are the values that you add? What skills do you have that people will be interested in? And I've mentioned already your elevator pitch. So learn to introduce yourself professionally and politely. Ensure you adopt the right dress code and the right tone when you meet different people. Whenever I come to Amber's offices, they're always very smart. But I go to some offices, and I can give you an example. I work with some of the leading technology companies, and they all wear shirts and T-shirts. When I turn up in a suit, they think the taxman's arrived. So know your audience, know who you're going to be talking to, and know what's appropriate. It may sound corny, but there's a truism here, which is you only get one chance to make a first impression. So make sure when you make that first impression, it counts. Now, to help you with this, I'm going to share a slide. This is a slide that I usually share with individuals with whom I'm giving career coaching. So what you'll see here is these are things you wish you'd known before you've gone to a job interview. Now, clearly I'm not here to talk to you about interviews, but there are some interesting parallels, and there are some very interesting statistics on this slide which are relevant to networking. And I think the most important one on here is on the right-hand side. And this is the heading that says, statistics show that when meeting new people, the impact is. So only 7% of the impact is what you actually say. 38% of the impact is through the quality of your voice, your grammar, and your overall confidence. And 55%, the biggest of all, is the way we dress, act, and walk through the door. So the point is here, people look at you and they make a snap judgment about you based on the visual image and the things that you say and do. So if you think about that, think about how you're going to approach people. I always try and approach people very politely and quite softly, explain how much I've been looking forward to meeting them. I've been trying to get to meet them during the conference or the event. And I'd just like 2 minutes of their time to discuss some areas of mutual interest, whatever that might be. But there are some other interesting facts on this slide as well. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see that when people go for interviews, for example, 67% of respondents to a survey said the biggest sort of turn-off was the failure to make eye contact. So again, if you're going to walk up to someone and introduce yourself, make sure you look them in the eye, make sure you smile, make sure your posture's right. These might sound like basic things, but if people, and we know people are only human, are going to make these judgments about you within the first 20 or 30 seconds, then make sure that your introduction is good. We have something in the recruitment industry called the horns and halo effect. You may have heard of this before. And what this does is it summarizes my point neatly, in that when we meet someone for the first time to interview, we either put a halo above their head and think they're some kind of angel, or we put the horns on their head and think they're some kind of devil. And it's very, very hard to shift someone's opinion. They tend to make that judgment within the first 90 seconds of meeting you, and it's no different when you can network as well. So this is a useful slide. I'll let you reflect on that at your leisure. In terms of networking strategies themselves, I've got a lot of things to discuss with you quickly today, and here are just a few. They may not all be relevant, but hopefully some will. The first thing I would say is you need to contact professional organizations in your field. And to give me a real example of this, I've met MBAs all over Europe, and sometimes I ask them what they want to do. They say they want to go into HR or into procurement. It doesn't matter what it is. But the reality is that for all of those professional areas, there is a professional body. So whilst you're doing your MBA, it's important that you link into that body and you start to engage in their professional activities. Because after all, that's where your potential future employers are going to be networking themselves. So don't be shy. Go and approach them. Explain you're doing an MBA and say you're really, really interested, for example, in HR. And there are lots of local groups that meet. So that will give you the opportunity to talk professionally to like-minded individuals. Of course, do your research. Visit company websites, organization websites. There's lots and lots that you can learn from that. But I think one of the most important things you can learn as a life skill, if you will, is to make sure that every month, once a month, you have lunch with someone you don't know who can help enhance your future career. So that means that you have to be proactive, you have to work through your network, looking and finding people who would be great to meet, even just for a sandwich and a coffee. But having that opportunity to open your mind and think about things changes your perspective. And you know what, when you go and meet these people, clearly you're not going to ask them for a job, but you are talking about areas of mutual interest, and that's the most important thing. I know that people are very much like to talk about themselves. They'll talk for a long time about areas of knowledge that they have, and they're really delighted when people have got questions around it because it allows them to talk more. For example, I could talk for hours on networking. I'm not going to, you'd be pleased to know, but people that have an interest in the knowledge will happily share it with you. And talking and sharing, if you have any questions, I believe there is a white box on the webinar which allows you to type questions in, and then I'll try and answer those at the very end of the session. Okay. You probably noticed once or twice I've mentioned the word conference during this webinar, and that's because I go to a lot of conferences, mostly around HR and employment, sometimes around my industry, but I'm always keen to go to places where my candidates and my clients are likely to congregate. That's where I'm going to meet new people. And as much as I might be interested in the slides and the speakers themselves, I actually go specifically to meet new contacts. So here's a couple of tips for you. If you're going to a conference, the first thing you need to do when you get there is get the delegate list. That's number one. You need to know who's in the room with you. And as you go through the delegate list, you can start to identify people who you'd like to converse with. There will be individuals from certain companies or organizations that are more appealing than others. That's your opportunity to think, who do I need to talk to? Once you've identified those, it's then a matter of finding them. Everyone's got name badges on. There's always helpers there from the conference organizers. Get them to introduce you to people. It's very easy to have a casual conversation by the water fountain or over a coffee or during the breaks, or even to go and sit next to someone who you particularly want to talk to. So for me, conferences and events are not just about listening to people. They're an opportunity for me to build my network out. Obviously, if you're looking for a new role, participating in job fairs and careers fairs, that's good. But I think for you as MBAs, it's a really powerful organization. Organizations or alumni associations, whether that be with your school itself or through AMBER. I mean, there are plenty of MBAs around the world who will be delighted to share the benefit of their experience with you, whether it's about a subject in particular, course syllabus, or whether it's about job-related opportunities in their industry. For example, if you wanted to know how to get into a particular arena, then you could contact that person specifically through the Alumni Association. And I think most MBAs have had a pretty good experience during their studies, and are all too happy to share it with you. Developing a digital strategy. This is very, very important. I happen to believe that that networking these days is not just about physical networking, although for me I prefer it that way. It's also about digital networking. There are plenty of opportunities to blog, to join groups, to raise your profile online. I'm going to talk about those separately in a minute, so if you can just wait for that, I'll come on to it. What I want to finish with on this slide is this last comment I make, which is give to get. Probably wondering what that might mean. It's fairly straightforward. It's interesting. I will do my utmost, wherever possible, to help people in my network. And I'll give you an example. The first time this ever happened to me in an MBA environment was about 3 years ago. I was doing a workshop at Cranfield Business School in the UK. And during the workshop, an Indian gentleman said to me, he really wanted to get into energy sustainability in India. Did I know anybody? And you know what? I didn't. I couldn't think of anyone I knew in that field. It's not really where I operate. But you know what? I went home and I thought about it some more, and I suddenly realized I did know somebody. I knew somebody who had told me they were on the Anglo-Indian Trade Commission. So I pinged an email off to this particular lady, explained the content of my conversation. I said, do you know anybody? And lo and behold, she came back and said, I happen to know the chairman of the Indian Sustainable Energy Commission. Well, bingo. That was a result. So what did I do? Well, quite simply, having gained her agreement, I did a virtual introduction by email to her and to the Indian gentleman, and they then took that forward from there. So you don't have to then follow through absolutely every introduction. I think the job is done when you've connected two people together. And there's a couple of things around this. One, it actually feels good to help other people. And there's a bit of karma involved sometimes, and sometimes what comes around goes around. So if people come to me for help with their career or just general information and advice and insight, I will give it. And if I don't know the answer, I will do my utmost to try and refer them to someone who does. So just think within your own cohort at your business school, what can you do for them? And what do you know that they don't? Who do you know that they don't? So whenever I speak to business schools and talk about networking, the first thing I do is sit them down as a group and say, okay, find out more about each other. Find out who knows people that will be of interest to you. And it's amazing what comes out of that. So it's quite a powerful piece. Okay. Now, I'm going to move on now and just talk specifically about networking and job search strategies, because I think the two are interlinked. It's hard to talk one without the other. Now, if you were to go to a professional careers consultant, they would charge you a lot of money for the advice I'm going to give you now for free. We're talking thousands of pounds. So if this is of interest to you, if you'd like to learn how to get your dream job, this is the chance to find out. Okay, first thing everyone needs to do, whatever stage you are in your career, is to determine your skill set. And I would do this in the form of a matrix. What are your hard skills? What are your soft skills? We know for general management positions around the world, and you know from the previous slide I've shown you, that it's not just about your IQ and your qualifications, it's about soft skills as well. It's about things like communication, negotiation, leadership. And for some of you that have ever explored the opportunity of MBA development careers, there are lots of these around. If you want to go online and Google, you'll find that companies like Santander and Nike, lots of companies run MBA graduate development programs. And if you look at the requirements in these programs, they're all very similar. They all talk about leadership, team working, flexibility, very, very similar skill sets they're looking for. So work out in your own mind, what are your hard skills, what are your soft skills? Once you know that, and you know the type of roles that you're looking for, it's really incumbent upon you to go out and do some research and look at the companies you'd like to work for. Okay? That's going to be different for all of you depending on your background and what your aspirations are. But think about where you'd like to go. Now, for some people, it may be smaller companies because it may be more realistic. We may not all be able to work at Google, for example, but there are smaller options as well. But think about that. Go and do some research. Find out the values and the culture of that company. Most employers now have some pretty well-honed career sections on their websites, and they will share with you videos about their values. And it's the one question now that candidates ask me more and more. What does the company stand for? What kind of culture will I find myself working in? Well, go and ask some people that work there. Go to Glassdoor. That's a very, very useful website to get some feedback. Once you've determined where you want to work, you need to really do some further research and find out who would be your boss in your dream job if you worked at that company. And actually, these days, that bit of research is much easier now than it ever used to be. And LinkedIn, if you're not registered there, is the place to go. To give you a bit of a heads up, I spend my whole day on LinkedIn. I have one screen with LinkedIn open all day. It gives me access to millions and millions of candidates worldwide. And it will allow you to very quickly research through some advanced functionality on LinkedIn who you would work for in your dream job. I don't advise that you necessarily go and find out the name of the recruiting manager or the HR director unless that's your field of interest. But let's say, for example, you want to go into the financial arena. You would want to go and find the name of the finance director or the CFO or the chief accountant. That's the individual that you're looking to talk to. Okay? So once you know who it is you need to approach, which company they're in, the key then is to write to them. And I always advise everyone to write an old-fashioned letter that you sign in ink at the bottom. Yes, you can email them if you like, but personally, I think people find it harder to throw paper letters in the bin. Some of you are probably thinking, don't be silly, Doug, I can just screw that up and chuck it away. But the reality is, people don't get many letters these days, but they get a lot of email, and they just press the delete button. So write to individuals, and what do you want to say? Well, I think it's quite simple, really. The first thing you want to do is to explain who you are, what you're doing, and then to flatter the individual in the letter. You want to say you've seen them speaking at a conference, or you've read an article they've written, something that's really of interest to you. This can't be false. It has to be genuine. So you genuinely have to be interested in that individual's background and content. And then you'll talk about that, because what that does really, it gets them interested in you. It gets them thinking, do you know what? This individual here really that's quite interesting. Yes, they are interested in the latest accounting procedures in the EU, for example, going back to my finance example. Or they can see the developments in my industry in legislation, for example. We have a lot of change with IR35 with our IT contractors right now. So people wrote to me with a degree of insight into what I do. I'm really, really get engaged by that. I get excited. It's much more important to do that than just write to me and say, I'd like to work in the recruitment industry. I'm thinking, well, why? What do you know about it? Where's the value for me? So make sure you've got something really tangible to talk to them about. And at the end of that letter, once you've explained why you're interested in them, you really want to ask for half an hour of their time to have a coffee, exchange ideas, but just talk about some of those issues that you've just described. So you're not asking them for a job, okay? You're not asking to meet for a job. You are asking to talk about areas of interest. So hopefully they'll agree, and lots of people I know, directors of big companies, will happily meet people if they get written to. As I say, they don't get many letters, so it's not as if your letter's one of 500 landing on their desk. It's probably one of one. That's the benefit that you have with this approach. And of course, if they agree to meet you, do your homework again. Make sure that before you meet them, you've done further research into their areas of interest, their professional credentials, their professional credibility, so that you can have a meaningful conversation. And what you'll find in that conversation is at some point the conversation will turn to you in terms of, oh, so you're doing your MBA, what do you want to do with your future career? And that's your opportunity then to explain to people, well, actually, I'm looking to work for a business like yours or an industry like yours, and that's where I'm going. And people will often be quite interested in that. Now, it's an interesting one. I don't know who's on this call today, but you learn this approach. Some people learn this approach the hard way. If anyone's ever been made redundant, and I'm not sure you have, normally when I ask the question with business school MBAs, they haven't, but there are people out there that have. And do you know what? It happened to me, I don't know, 15 years ago, a long time ago, and I worked in an industry where we kept our cards very close to our chest. We didn't really talk to our competitors. So when it happened to me, I didn't know what to do, frankly. So I thought, I'm going to make it my business to get to know the 12 or 15 companies that I'd really like to work for in my industry that I knew from experience. And I did exactly what I've just advised you to do. I wrote to the MDs of those companies, explained what I'd done, explained my value, my capability, my skill set, talked about some of the work they did, some of the work I'd observed, some of the articles that the MD had written in the trade press, and asked to meet with them for a coffee. And you know, I never, ever had to look for a job again myself. People came to me. And that's the benefit of this. If you start to build networks within your target sector, you will find that opportunities slowly but surely start to come to you. And that is just a wonderful, wonderful way of not having to submit your CV online for job after job after job. I have my own business now. It's very different. But for a period of time, that was really, really important to me that I built my network and I was comfortable and confident with the quality of the network. What I also say to everyone who takes this approach is that once you've got your dream job and you're all very happy, don't stop networking. This is a continuous process. One of the challenges with senior appointments in companies is if you are appointed, let's say, by an MD or a CEO into a senior role, you may be appointed as part of a solution to a corporate problem. If that CEO or MD fails to deliver against their objectives, you might find yourself becoming part of the next problem. Okay? So don't think just because you're sat there in your dream job that you're going to be sat there forever. From personal experience, I can tell you now that I very rarely see CVs of individuals who have been in a company for more than 4 or 5 years. If I've gone back 15, 16 years, I saw lots of individuals with 12, 13, 15, 20 years experience. So change is more discontinuous now than it ever was. So that's really, really important. Learn to work rooms at conferences. And I think what's really important, if all this is bothering you and you're thinking, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a little bit shy, I've got to be straight with you. I think you have to get over yourself. I think you have to think about yourself, think about what you've got to do. You've got to put your shoulders back, look people squarely in the eye, and you've got to go and engage with them. It's absolutely essential. If you find it difficult face-to-face, there is a digital approach as well, which we will be coming on to. Perfect. So, I mentioned personal branding earlier on, and personal branding is very, very important in this space. And if you think about your personal brand footprint, it's made up of 2 distinct halves. One half is your human footprint. This is about your relationships, and we've talked about those, your professional relationships, your physical health, your reputation, your character. And all that's essential when you're going to meet with people physically. But the other half, of course, is the digital footprint. And I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this in terms of blogging. Some of you may blog. Undoubtedly, you have social networks. Some of you may even have avatars. I don't know. But online reputation management is really, really important. So for networking, the digital world offers you a tremendous opportunity to start to engage. So if we look at the digital world, what are the most popular social media platforms? You may well be familiar with these. I'm not going to read them all out to you. What I am going to say is that from a professional point of view, the most important social media site for all of you is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has over 300 million members now around the world. All recruiters use it, whether they are headhunters like me or whether they're in-house recruiters for corporations. And everybody is now working in LinkedIn, not only to look for new jobs, but to join industry groups, which are like mini communities really for people with like-minded interests. 95% of companies use LinkedIn for recruitment. It's a very, very high number. LinkedIn has really, to a large extent, replaced some of the job boards that we used to use. So it's probably now the most viable and valuable online site for you to participate in. And here's just a few post-graduation tips for you, which I think you should take away from this. The first thing is to spend time on your profile. Make sure it's filled out completely. Use keywords so other people can search and find you easily. Make sure your photo is professional and appropriate. And then connect with everyone. Connect with your MBA classmates, professors, past employers, people you've interned for perhaps, and people that you've engaged with through your networking. And of course, ask for recommendations. We take these very seriously. We like to look at positive comments on LinkedIn when we're establishing candidates' credibility. And of course, during the connections, you can send comments, you can offer congratulations, you can like things that some of your contacts do, you can introduce people to each other, as I mentioned before, you can give to get. And of course, you can take advantage of new projects and resources. So it's a really, really powerful tool, and I can't recommend it enough. And just a little bit of fun here. This is the difference a good LinkedIn profile makes. I'm sure you've all, or some of you have seen the movie The Hangover. I think this really says it all. If your LinkedIn profile is good, then hopefully you're going to look like the chaps at the bottom half of the picture. Okay, quick summary then on digital networking. I think there's some key things here. First thing is don't be elusive. Be found. So complete LinkedIn, yes, but there are other social medias as well, the platforms that you could be involved in. Add in your specialisms, obtain recommendations, put your education there, and importantly, keep your information up to date and current. A lot of LinkedIn gurus recommend that once a month you take time to do that. And you will find that if you do update your information regularly, then your name will appear at the top of the list of people who share your name when others are searching for you. So there's an added benefit there as well. I mentioned about the photos. Use your status message area, join groups and blogs. Tweeting is important. Twitter's really, really grown, as you know. And again, the personal branding gurus suggest that you should tweet at least twice a week. It is about quality and not about quantity. You do not have to have 5,000 connections on LinkedIn to make it work for you. What's more important is you have the right ones. And finally, something I shared on my previous webinar is that if you're feeling brave, why not create a 2-minute video on YouTube called Why Hire Me? This is getting more and more acceptance globally. Some business schools do real-life videos for their MBAs to share with their alumni. So it's quite an interesting idea, but as I said, think very carefully before you do it because you don't want to go into it unless you are fully prepared. Okay, I'm coming on to my final slide now. Just a closing thought, really. I was reflecting on this last night as I prepared to speak to you all, and I was mindful of an interesting quote from a sales trainer that I know, and he said this. He said, the two most powerful weapons are courage and persistence. Nothing can stop a person armed with both. And I think there's a degree of truth in that. There is a degree of truth in that you need to be courageous enough to begin networking, think about how you're going to approach it, and then be persistent in your approach. Don't just do it for five weeks or 6 weeks, but weave it into your whole sort of life plan, if you will. And if you're struggling with it, thinking, Doug, you've given me so many ideas here, where do I start? Well, this is what I would do. Have some very specific objectives at first, whether it's job-related or interest-related, and take some small steps. If the first step is quite simply talking to your fellow MBAs, that's a good place to go. If it then moves into the alumni sphere, fantastic. Maybe at that point you want to start thinking about some of the ideas I've described earlier in the session. But do make sure you develop your unique selling points and your elevator pitch. Do spend time preparing and rehearsing before you just go up to people and accost them. No one likes that. But use your time at business school to network as much as possible. I have to say you are in the perfect position. When you're at business school, you know, you're working on a whole variety of topics, from strategy to marketing to change management, and I'm sure there's a lot more. So whilst you're doing that reading and you're looking at the leading companies in that field, it's a wonderful opportunity to approach individuals on the basis of research. Okay. Again, some business schools have great links with companies in their area. I know some business schools have project teams, whether it be within consulting or within marketing, and get involved and take the opportunity to show people what you can do. It's absolutely essential. Clients love to see results, so it's not so much about telling them how great you are, show them the results. They really like to see them. And again, just a couple more things. Just don't be shy. I know it doesn't suit everybody, and culturally it doesn't suit everybody going into rooms full of strangers and trying to approach them. But once you try, it's probably a little bit easier than you think. You'll find that other people are quite glad that someone's actually come and spoken to them. They might be on their own that day. They're stood there with a cup of tea or a glass of water, feeling a bit lonely themselves, and actually they're quite glad of the company. So don't be scared to talk to people. Okay, and keep energized. Really keep energized during this MBA process. I once spoke to a group of MBAs, and I went through this whole networking piece, and one lady turned around to me and she said, "I can't do this." And I said, "Well, why's that?" And she said, "Well, I'm doing my MBA. I'm too busy to go networking." And I said, I understand that, and I understand you have pressures of essays and deadlines and dissertations, get it. I said, but your MBA is only a short period in your life ultimately, and you're probably doing it for the reason that most people do them, which is to enhance their opportunities in life going forward. So if you think about that, a year later or 2 years later, your MBA will be finished, and you'll be back out in the world of work. So make every opportunity available to yourself. Take that time, even if it means at weekends, to undertake some of these activities. It will pay dividends in the end. Okay, I think I've been talking for about 45 minutes now. I think we'll leave it there. I'm going to pass you back to Femi.
Thank you very much, Doug. I really enjoyed that session. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I do. Now we're going to go into the Q&A session of this webinar. Just a quick reminder, the slides and video will be available in the Association of MBA community after the webinar. So please send your questions now. Right, so we've got one question at the moment. It's from Mahmood. What is the best digital strategy you can recommend? What to do and what not to do?
Okay, thanks Mahmood for that question. I talked a little bit there about the approach to your digital strategy. And I think the digital strategy is a way of engaging with target audiences in the very best way. And it needs to be a blended approach, I believe. I talked about LinkedIn. I won't go over that all over again. I think you probably got that message on that. But I think for some individuals, they even have their own websites, and they're blogging continuously, they're commenting on articles, they may be linking up with other business schools and running joint digital events. There's lots and lots of different things you can do. In fact, there's not one size that fits all. It's what you feel comfortable with. But what you're trying to do is to bring yourself to the attention of your audience. I mean, for example, as a recruiter, you would probably expect this, but I have over 2,500 connections on LinkedIn. I kind of collect people. It's what I do for a living. And I will broadcast out to that community on a regular basis. Sometimes it may be jobs that we're handling, but on other times it's just to give people insights into the industry, what's happening, what's hot, industry trends. I mean, for example, you may be interested to learn, those of you coming up towards the end of your MBA, career prospects in Western Europe have never been so good. There was an increase of about 27% in permanent jobs this year against last year. And we also know there are only half as many professional contractors available now compared to this time last year. what that tells us, of course, is that we're moving back towards full employment, certainly in the UK. And what we will see this year, and maybe of interest to many of you, is we'll see a growth in wages. So there's been wage repression for the last 5 years because of the recession, and we're now starting to see employers break out of that, which is terrific news for two parties. It's great news for the government because they can better tax receipts, and it's great news for you as individuals because salaries will increase. So it's about sharing information that I think is relevant to your audience. Now, people are interested in trends in employment, which is why I broadcast that, but for you it could be something completely different.
Okay, we've got another question. I believe my MBA has opened my mind a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd like to do as I enjoy so many things. How do you reckon I should focus on some key areas to network?
Well, this is one of the great challenges, and interestingly, when I do career coaching with individuals, the first thing I try and do is ask people to really focus on what they think is important to them. So if, for example, you know you want to be a marketing director, you can focus your energies into that space, those individuals and that network. However, because you're doing an MBA and because you're intelligent and your mind's being open to so many possibilities, I run across this a lot. You know, what do I do? The world's my oyster. How do I start to develop things? I really don't know. And again, I think the simple answer to that is to start with your own business school, whether it's the cohort themselves or the career advisors that you have, and ask people to introduce you to organizations in your geography, in their network, so you can at least start to have taster conversations with people. Find out more about marketing, find out more about HR, find out more about consulting. Most of the MBAs I talk to want to be consultants, okay? And many of you on this call probably want to be consultants too. But often I'll say to them, what do you know about consulting? Have you actually spoken to a management consultant? And sometimes the answers I get back are quite brief. So I say to them, you're in the perfect position. You're doing an MBA, you're interested in consulting work, go and talk to people. Go and find out what it's all about. And the business school themselves, trust me, have always got good connections and can normally line up a conversation for you. Now, this links on to the next question because there's another question here from Marcus Mulliger. Can you give a concrete example on how to best start a conversation with a stranger of interest? Now, I think you're talking about a face-to-face conversation. I'll use that as an example. But I'll give you an example. I go to conferences and I'll know who I want to talk to, and I will very carefully go up and just say, oh, hello, good afternoon. My name's Doug. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Femi sat next to me at the moment, by the way, in case you're wondering. You can't visualize this. I understand you work for the Association of MBAs. Yes, I do, says Femi. And I'll say, well, that's really, really interesting because I've done a little bit of work with the Association of MBAs. I work with Leah and I work with so-and-so. And they talked about you in very, very glowing terms. The work done around memberships is quite innovative. I know you started a new webinar digital campaign. And we'd like to know something more about that. And that will hopefully encourage Femi to tell me about what's been going on because I've said that it's positive and it's good and I'm sure he'd like to share his work with me. And then we start to engage in a conversation. It is actually no more than a conversation. I'm interested in what he's doing. He wants to tell me more. We start to do that way. At the end of the conversation, I would say, Femi, that's really great. I'd love to keep in touch with you. Do you have a business card? Hopefully he'll give me his card. If he doesn't have one, he'll tell me that we can connect on LinkedIn or I can email him at Amber. And then from that moment on, when you've got someone's agreement to connect, what it allows you to do at a later date is to write back and say, Femi, really enjoyed meeting you, really enjoyed our conversation regarding your new digital strategy. I'd like to follow up on that. I'm going to be in London on Tuesday, January the whatever. If you're around, it'd be great to meet up for a quick coffee. And in my experience, most people will say yes to that. That's my experience. So I'm trying to give you an example, but that's how I do things. So if the key points are there, polite introduction, know who the person is, have done some research on what they do. It's like having a little knowledge goes a long way. Keep abreast of current affairs, know what's going on, and there's always something where there's a connection. I'm sure many of you have heard this expression, there's only 7 degrees of separation between all of us, which means there are only 7 contact points between me and anybody else on this webinar. The truth is, it's actually a lot smaller than that. I find in my professional world it's maybe 2 degrees of separation. There's always somebody who knows somebody. And if you want to do research on somebody, look at their LinkedIn profile and see how you're connected. See who your 2nd and 3rd degree connections are. And it's quite interesting what people will write on their profiles that will give you an insight into them. Hope that helped, Marcus. Okay.
All right, so let me just give a big thank you to Doug for that great session, and thank you everyone for sending your questions. I just want to inform you of our next webinar, which will be taking place on the 21st of January. The topic is Finding an Exciting Job in a Tough Market by John Lee. On behalf of the Association of MBA, we'd like to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Take care.
Just before we go, everybody, just one final word from me. Sorry, Femi. Just to say, if any of you would like to link in with me, I offer that to all the MBAs I speak to through Amber. You'll find me, Doug Gray, G-R-A-Y. I'm the Managing Director of Talent Talk. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help you if I can.
Enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.
Thank you very much.